Hey guys, or as they say in Ukrainian, Pripyat. So this is my little tour of Chernobyl. I realise the Slavic internet fad or memes, cheeky breeky stuff plateaued maybe 1 or 2 years ago, but hopefully you'll still find it interesting. So upon entrance to the exclusion zone, I was greeted by a few sights, one of which was this absolutely mistake-riddled sign full of grammatical errors. I found this map which outlaid the contamination zone and this little monument which was made by visitors quite interesting. After the checkpoint we saw some wild horses and they just run around doing their own thing, nobody owns them, and as you would imagine they are pretty easily spooked. Now the first port of call was an abandoned village, but it wasn't completely abandoned because we were told one old lady still lived there. She robustly refused to move even after the evacuations, etc. And she still lives in a house which we actually visited. Lots of fruit there growing, and we were told she actually walks 5 kilometers every day to the shop because she's in the middle of nowhere. And I believe she's in her 80s. Now it dawned on me that a lot of the photographers here probably rearranged stuff just to make it look more creepy. Perhaps you can spot the little bear. Now a recurring theme in this place is items which have been sorted into their respective types. You can see here the jars, and often there were lots of chairs, other metal things, probably which were gathered for scrap. An interesting story was apparently they melted down a lot of the scrap from this place and created irradiated cars which were then driven by the Soviet citizens. Of course this resulted in a lot of health problems and God knows why they did this. Now we move on to the Duga radar station. I think this was part of a network of radars that kind of covered Europe to detect missile launches, something like this. Perhaps I'm wrong. If I'm wrong, please correct me. Now, again, the rumour here is that the station is going to be torn down in the next couple of years. So whether that happens or not remains to be seen. Some unfortunate soul actually lives here, presumably to deter daredevils or vandals. You can see his dog in one of the later slides.
O flower of Scotland.
Anyway, I'm digressing a little bit here. Now, the school was one of the most atmospheric places I visited on the tour, but I got the impression that many of these items were arranged in kind of a stooge fashion, just for the purposes of photography. I'm not an expert in dosimeters, not by any means. The usual background radiation in a normal place should be about 0.12, 0.15, or so they told me. When we were on the roads cruising around, it was about 0.20, and at the school you can see the radiation is pretty high. It's about 8 times the normal levels. This is the approach. But before we actually enter the grounds or get as close as we can, we first greet the local wildlife. We actually got to feed these catfish, and I guess the local strays had caught on to the fact that tourists often stop here, so they were also here to poach our bread. They were a little bit jumpy, but again, against my better judgment, I clapped them. And what can I say, I just love dogs. Fortunately, the cover was still off at this time. This was 2015, but you can see in some of the later slides that the cover is still very much under construction. I think it was put on top soon after. You can see the funnel has already been chopped in half, the iconic funnel. So I was a little bit disappointed that I couldn't get the complete shot of the station, but it still could have been a lot worse. Radiation levels obviously very high here, but not high enough to impede the construction work, and still not the highest that was detected during the course of the trip. This is a warning sign for the Red Forest. This is one of the many areas that was not decontaminated, and we actually couldn't stop here, we couldn't visit it. We had to drive through very quickly, and this was the highest reading that was detected. I think it went up to 9.0 or thereabouts just when we were driving past this area quickly. So yeah, this area had the highest radiation that I detected personally. And now we get to the holy grail for urban explorers. This is Pripyat. Highlights of the tour included the sports complex, the theme park, and one high-rise building. The high-rise building involved a rather precarious Mission Impossible style wall hugging along a rather dodgy balcony. This was forced upon us by the architecture of the building, which had a stairwell up until maybe the 12th floor, and then for some reason the last 2 floors you had to go outside onto this balcony. I'm not a big fan of heights, but I'm rather proud that I made it to the top. You can see some shots later on which are from the roof of this building. The roof was not in the best condition, and being around 95 kilograms, I was rather afraid that I might fall through this. Nonetheless, we proceeded, and I hope you enjoy these shots. Now, the tour guides didn't watch us too closely. We could actually go out of sight for around a minute or so explore the various buildings. It wasn't too strict, as long as you didn't run off into the wilderness, you know. And actually, considering the surprise radiation pockets, I don't think you would really want to. And because of this relatively liberal free reign, I was able to do some naughty things. I was able to take a slash in one of the rooms. Unfortunately, this was a necessity. And I was also able to carve my name in one of the walls. You know, just to leave my mark on the area, I guess. I thought the little human shadows that had been spray painted onto some of the buildings were a nice touch, quite in keeping with the moody atmosphere that you would expect. Unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, the day was rather bright and cheery, you know, very sunny, and it was quite hard to believe that a tragedy had actually happened here. The last slide you will see is a monument to the firemen that were sent in rather haphazardly upon news of the catastrophe. A lot of soldiers also died here too because they were sent in without any protective equipment. I was told an interesting anecdote by one of the tour guides. He told me that the when the sarcophagus was being placed in the reactor, many workers were climbing a ladder and they could only stay at the top of the ladder for 20 seconds because the emissions were so serious. So there was kind of a human chain. You know, somebody would start hammering a nail or something and then somebody else would have to finish it. So perhaps that will give you an idea of the severity of the situation and just how quickly people were condemned to their fate. The evacuation was also delayed by the authorities. I don't think people were evacuated until as late as 48 hours after the explosion. Life just carried on as normal. People didn't actually know what had happened, as unbelievable as that may seem. You know, you can read about this, the various reasons why. And on that bombshell, we will finish. I hope it was good for you too.